When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With twinspires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with twinspires. And now you can race to victory with twinspires tournaments.
We're back with the twinspires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with Vance Hansen and Nick Tamero filling in for James Scully today. Always a pleasure to have you, Nick, and I think you might be in one of the warmer places in the country compared to everybody else, but even for you, it's not that warm.
Yeah, chilly for us. Glad to be joining you. I know you guys are freezing your backsides off, but well, sunny days are ahead. Don't worry. You'll dig out of that snow eventually.
Well, we'll be talking about sunny California, talking some Santa Anita racing, the San Vicente, where Barnes made his second career start. We'll also look at the Derby points races, the Jerome and the Smarty Jones Stakes, and what else caught our eye from the weekend. So, Nick, I'll start with you. Let's talk about the San Vicente, where Barnes won by 5.5 lengths. What were your thoughts on that race?
Yeah, look, this was a powerful race by Barnes, right? And I mean, we all knew when Bob Baffert sent Barnes over to Churchill to become his first starter since the Derby of 2021, there was a pretty decent chance he was good. And I think the initial reaction on the part of a lot of people was, oh, he didn't look that great. He didn't really win all that impressively, but it was 5.5 furlongs. He had to come from a little bit off the pace. He gave up a big experience edge to Innovator, who he ran down late. He was a much more complete version of hopefully what we're going to eventually see from him this time around, where he stalked the pace, went on with it, and in doing so, just completely embarrassed a horse like Bullard, who was 2 for 2 coming in, had won the Bob Hope at Del Mar, and clearly proved that when he doesn't really get that pace set up and he's got to utilize a little bit more of his speed early, he's not nearly as effective. And I mean, we can see in this replay from the Santa Anita Park X account that Barnes is pulling clear authoritatively. This was a very good looking effort. And to me, he looks like a horse that deserves to be on the short list for Derby probables.
Vance, what do you think?
Well, jockey Juan Hernandez reportedly told Bob Baffert after the San Vicente that Barnes was still a little green in this race. It's hard to decipher that because, as Nick said, it was a lot more mature and professional performance than what he showed at Churchill Downs in late November, and so much so that one can understand why he cost $3.2 million as a yearling. Broadly speaking, though, I think it's still a bit hard to judge Barnes's Derby potential off this race. The San Vicente has been a race that Baffert has dominated throughout much of the modern history, and Baffert has trained the 1-2 finishers in this race 4 of the last 5 years. So the San Vicente has basically become an intramural battle among Baffert starters in recent years. Unless this colt stays home to run in the San Felipe, which could also descend into an intramural battle of Baffert runners. I would imagine his 2-turn debut could come in the race like the Risen Star at Fairgrounds going 1 1/8, or the Rebel at Oaklawn going 1 1/16. I think his performance in one of those 2 races would tell us a lot more about his place in the pecking order, not only within the Baffert stable, which is pretty loaded for the Derby so far, but on the Derby trail in general. So to sum up, Barnes is undoubtedly one to watch, but for me right now, he's an underlay for the Derby for the time being.
I don't have much to add, but a few quick notes. Barnes did improve his Brisnet speed figure to a 94. He had a 121 class rating. Certainly looked much more professional compared to that 5.5 furlong sprint at Churchill Downs on November 27th. And you mentioned, Vance, the success that Bob Baffert has had in this race, and Juan Hernandez too won his 4th straight San Vicente. In the history of the Derby, we have had 10 winners of the Derby come out of the San Vicente, though this isn't a points race anymore. So no points for Barnes yet. We'll see him stretch out to a route next out and see how he handles that and if he gets any points toward that leaderboard. But let's move over to those points races, the Jerome and the Smarty Jones. Vance, what were your takeaways from those races? Do you feel like we have a potential Derby winner from any of these races?
I saw no immediate Derby ramifications from either the Jerome, which for me was a better race when it used to be run in September during the Belmont Fall Meet, and the Smarty Jones at Oaklawn. Cyclone State, the Iowa bred winner of the Jerome, clearly relishes the one-turn mile at Aqueduct. This was his third win in a row over that track and distance. And like his other two scores, he was pretty much left to dictate matters on his own terms and over a slow playing track on Saturday. It sounds like the Saudi Derby or the Gotham, both over a mile, are short-term options for this horse. I question how far he really wants to go, given his style of running and the fact he's so proficient going the one-turn mile. Moving on to the Smarty Jones Coal Battle is a feel-good story for the journeyman trainer Lonnie Riley. This is undoubtedly the best horse he's ever trained in a very long career. Coal Battle has now won 2 straight Derby preps. He took the Springboard Mile at Remington last month, and he's undefeated on dirt with a 4-for-4 record. However, like Cyclone State, he benefited from setting a soft pace on Saturday before opening up late. It sounds like his connections are going to point him now for the Rebel Stakes, which figures to be a much stronger test for him and a much stronger indicator of his potential Derby success going forward.
See, Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly want to give Cyclone State his due. He's a horse who's gone through his conditions, winning a maiden race and then coming back to win a one other then. And as Vance said, they're sort of carbon copies of one another. What was interesting about his Jerome win is that race had a pretty significant amount of speed. That is not the Jerome. That was at 7 furlongs. The Jerome's at a mile, but similar silks on the winners. It was the 8th on Saturday. But anyway, I can talk about it as if we're watching it. But Cyclone State, as Vance said, the field did so pretty authoritatively. And there was a lot of pace in that race, and he really overcame it very nicely and was able to dictate terms. One of the things about Jockey Luis Rivera Jr. and his ability on this, what he's done on this horse consistently, is he'll sort of let him kind of take the air out of everybody else. And I love that approach with a speed horse. The problem, as Vance alluded to, is that it's awfully tough to make a living like that around 2 turns over and over, right? Especially when you're running against some good speed horses as well. He feels like a horse that maybe got good in that sort of second wave of 2-year-old into 3-year-old time of the year, and that there are going to be horses that develop now a little bit more than him as time goes by. But all things considered, speed figure wise, it was a good effort. I think a Jerome that is run in this kind of fashion from a speed figure perspective is a respectable one. So I don't want to necessarily act like he's not quite good enough, but he's going to have to run a lot better in his next start, no doubt about it. I'd like to see him stretched out more so than in the Gotham or the Saudi Derby. What you're doing in running in either of those races is you're unfortunately opening the door to him not running around 2 turns before the Derby, which I think would be a massive mistake. And I'm always hopeful that all of those horses coming in off 8+ week layoffs all lose, because the last thing we need is them running less frequently before the Kentucky Derby. So I'd like to see them, even if they don't try a race like the Withers, because maybe that comes back a little too quickly, but definitely point for the Wood Memorial ultimately as his final prep.
And I'll focus a little bit more on Coal Battle. I felt like he was a little bit more impressive to me, though. His Bristol speed figure was a little light. It was an 82, which was a step below that 92 he got for the Springboard Mile. But he has now won 2 points races. He's also won at 6 different racetracks throughout his 6. Well, he has 4 wins from 6 starts, and then his 2 losses came on the turf. So 4 wins from his 4 dirt starts. Seems like a very versatile colt. He came from off the pace in the Springboard Mile and in that stakes race at Delta Downs, and then he went gate to wire since there was a lack of speed in the Smarty Jones. So I certainly feel like if there's one to come out of these 2 Derby preps, it's more likely to be Coal Battle, not to mention that, as we've talked about, the connections of Cyclone State are looking at that 1-turn Saudi Derby and potentially not even running 2 turns before the Kentucky Derby. So will he even get points toward the Derby to make the field if he's running overseas? But we do have a sound bite from Lonnie Briley, who got the win with Coal Battle. So let's check that out.
Coal Battle, much the best in this year's running of the Smarty Jones, trained by Lonnie Briley. Great ride by Juan Vargas. Now the Springboard Mile winner, much closer to the pace today. Was that kind of anticipated?
Well, not exactly. You know, he always breaks good, and we grab him and kind of set him back, you know. And today he went to the front, and he was flicking his ears, and he stayed up there, and I'm thinking, I'm going to kill that jockey. And I told Vargas, I done fired you and hired you, man. But he ran big, and every time we run him, he just seems to surprise us. You know, he's a neat little horse.
That's a great kind of horse to have in the barn, owned by Norman Stables. I tell you what, he really shifted into a different gear coming down the stretch. It's got to feel good to get 10 more points towards the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby. How's it feel to officially have a Kentucky Derby contender, sir?
I don't know if it's set in yet. No, it's crazy for the little guy, you know. Yes, ma'am.
We'll go get warm, celebrate. Cole Battle burns brightly in this year's Smarty Jones.
And Lonnie Riley did say after the race, too, that Cole Battle was full of himself, and he came back from the test barn and bucking and kicking and playing. So sounds like Cole Battle's in good form, and let's see what he does the next start. Let's move on to what else caught our eye from the weekend. So, Nick, what was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say what caught my eye was it reminded me watching that replay of the Smarty Jones how horrific the riding was in that race to allow Cole Battle to get to the lead. It's like an episode of Luck or something where they're all pulling their horses back the first half mile, and that enabled this seemingly dead last closer to get the lead. But I couldn't possibly go on without making that mention. There were a couple of performances out west that I thought outside of the stakes race that we talked about were worthy of mention. The first of which came from Rodriguez, second-time starter who had run behind Romanesque in his debut. He came back and broke his maiden on Saturday afternoon, part of a 4-win day for Bob Baffert. Did so very impressively, earned a speed figure that would make him very competitive in stakes races. The question, of course, is that he was able to be treated with Lasix, with it being a maiden special weight race and him being a newly turned 3-year-old. He'll have to come off it, obviously, as he goes into Graded Stakes Company. But boy, he looks ready for it. He is going to be prepared to try Graded Stakes Company next time out. Baffert also later on the card won the Las Flores with Ricci, kicking off a Baffert Exacta where she beat the heavily favored Pleasant, who was coming out of the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. And I think this increased in our uncertainty about the quality of the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, at least mine, because now we've had 3 short-priced runbacks all lose. And it seems safe to assume that this year's Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint was really not on par with what I think some of us hoped it would be given the quality of that field. Now, am I saying you should be sitting around and waiting for more runbacks to bet against? Not necessarily, but I do think as far as that race goes, you want to cast a little bit of a negative view on it at this point, because once, twice you could forgive, but this was a dull performance from Pleasant at 1-5. So I think we can have a healthy dose of skepticism about the quality of that Filly and Mare Sprint.
And I'll jump in because my what else was also related to Rodriguez, who had a mile time of 1:35.91, which was actually faster than his stablemate Miramati, who won later on the card, one of those 4 wins for Baffert. And Rodriguez also had been working out with Barnes on December 29th, and Baffert said that he was in Barnes's face the whole way. So certainly it makes him sound like a competitive potential Kentucky Derby contender, but as you mentioned, had the Lasix, so we need to see what happens when he comes off of that. And then as far as Miramati, this was a horse that has taken a while to get it all together. Didn't break his maiden until his 8th career start, but had been facing Stakes Company as a maiden. And then in that 8th start, won in impressive fashion, then last out, did not have a good day whatsoever, but went gate to wire at Santa Anita in an allowance, won by, I believe it was 7 lengths. So Rodriguez won by 7 lengths, Miramati won by 4.5, but still both dominant performances. But the fact that Rodriguez ran a little bit faster, again, gotta keep him on your radar. But he's also by Authentic, who was a late bloomer, won the Kentucky Derby, but it was in September that year because of COVID. And Baffert has even said that he expects progeny of Authentic to be late bloomers. So will Rodriguez be ready for the first Saturday of May, or better second half of the season? That is yet to be determined, but certainly one to keep an eye on. And Baffert has a lot in his barn to keep an eye on, including Barnes, who was the individual favorite for Pool 2 of the Kentucky Derby Future Wager. So I'm sure his backers are feeling pretty good after this weekend. Vance, I know you have a different horse that caught your eye, so tell us about that.
Yeah, this is a little more offbeat in a relatively minor race. It was the 7th race at Fairgrounds on Saturday, an open maiden special. And as you can see here, number 1, Horizonte, just was left at the gate after hopping at the start, conceded the field about 9 lengths entering the first turn and through the first quarter mile. Horizonte was third-time starter, had finished 4th in both of his first 2 outings. But as you can see here, despite the slow pace set by El Magnifico, was making his 9th career start. Horizonte made just an incredible recovery. And as you see here in the final 16th of a mile, he is going to get up to win by a nose. So I just thought this was kind of a noteworthy effort by a relatively unremarkable horse. He's not destined to have a remarkable career, but those kind of starts and finishes are ones that you just don't see in everyday racing. So kudos to the connections of Horizonte, trainer Paul McGee, for clutching victory from the jaws of defeat at Fairgrounds on Saturday. And along those same lines, one race earlier, there was a 3-year-old maiden filly named Rather Distinct who broke very poorly in a turf, a maiden going 1 1/16. She was interfered with at leaving the gate, so she had some excuse for lagging far behind the field most of the way. In her case, she only managed to finish 4th, but she only was beaten 1.5 lengths during that rough journey. So I think Rather Distinct is a 3-year-old turf maiden filly to watch the next time she reappears for trainer Eddie Keneally.
I'm a little disappointed we didn't get a John Dooley soundbite with that replay. Anyway, that's all the time we have today for the Racing Roundtable. Thanks again, Nick, for joining us. Have fun this weekend with Sam Houston, but also watching the Texans play in the playoffs.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you all next time.
When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With twinspires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with twinspires. And now you can race to victory with twinspires tournaments.